This is the story of the murder of Jack Clifford Holland. He was a 19-year-old resident of the Raleigh area in Shelby County, Tennessee, whose life was deeply intertwined with the industrial landscape of mid-century Memphis. Born on August 13, 1923, Jack was the eldest son of Amanda, Mandy, Holland Burnett, and had taken on significant responsibilities as a protector and provider for his younger siblings. Freddie, Fentress, Vivian and Ethel following the absence of his biological father S.G. Boss Holland. Jack spent his final years working for the Firestone Tire and Rubber Company, a massive plant that served as a cornerstone of the local economy. His daily routine likely involved the hard, physical labor characteristic of the factory floor, contributing to the city's vital manufacturing output during the early years of World War II. This era of his life came to a violent and premature end on June 28, 1942, when he was murdered after being shot in the abdomen. Jack was a former member of the Civilian Conservation Corps, CCC, a New Deal-era program that had instilled in him a sense of discipline and hard work during the Great Depression. His life was defined by a steady, earnest climb toward a promising future, only to be violently derailed by the volatility and darkness of his home life. By 1942, he had successfully transitioned into a vital role at the Firestone Tire and Rubber Company plant in Memphis, contributing to the nation's wartime production efforts during a period of intense global conflict. The architect of this tragedy was Jack's stepfather, 44-year-old Wilson Burnett, a defense worker earning a substantial weekly wage of $78, a small fortune in the early 1940s. Burnett was a man whose financial stability was deeply undercut by a destructive pattern of severe alcoholism and domestic violence. Court records and newspaper accounts from the Commercial Appeal paint a grim picture of the Burnett household on Allen Road. Amanda Burnett had already endured a marriage defined by terror, and she had previously filed a suit for divorce in the circuit court, charging her husband with extreme cruelty and testifying that he had beaten and choked her on multiple occasions. On the weekend of June 28, 1942, this cycle of abuse reached a boiling point. Burnett had been drinking heavily since the preceding Thursday, descending into what witnesses described as a fit of rage, fueled by liquor and internal malice. On the morning of that fateful Sunday, before Jack had even returned home, Burnett had already terrorized Amanda by firing a 12-gauge shotgun through the front screen door simply to hear her scream. He spent the remainder of the morning systematically destroying the family's possessions, including a pair of Jack's trousers, an act of petty, calculated malice that would serve as the trigger for the final confrontation. When Jack Holland returned to the family's modest cottage that afternoon, he was met not with the peace of a Sunday rest, but with the wreckage of his belongings. When he questioned his stepfather about the ruined trousers, seeking an explanation for the senseless destruction, the situation escalated with terrifying speed. Jack retreated to the kitchen, perhaps seeking a moment of normalcy or simply trying to de-escalate the tension, as he stood at a wash basin to wash his face and hands. He was entirely unarmed and posed no physical threat, yet Burnett emerged from an adjacent room with his 12-gauge shotgun leveled and ready. From a distance of approximately 20 feet, Burnett fired a single blast of buckshot directly into Jack's stomach. The force of the blast was devastating at such close range. As Jack collapsed to the floor in agony, he looked at his mother and uttered a haunting plea that would remain etched in her memory for the rest of her days. "Mother, get a doctor, he has killed me." As Amanda fled in terror to the home of a neighbor for safety, Burnett was seen by witnesses calmly walking away from the house into a nearby wooded area, the shotgun still slung over his shoulder with an air of cold indifference. Jack was rushed by a Thompson Brothers ambulance to St. Joseph's Hospital, but the internal damage was insurmountable. He was pronounced dead just 15 minutes after arrival. His final words to the medical attendants served as a stark, tragic indictment of the absolute senselessness of the act. He did it for nothing. Meanwhile, sheriff's deputies conducted a frantic manhunt in the thick woods near the Raleigh-Frazier Road, eventually apprehending Burnett about half a mile from the crime scene. Upon his arrest, police found the murder weapon and 3 extra shells in his pocket. Burnett appeared bruised and sullen in the back of the squad car, a stark contrast to the innocent young life he he had just extinguished over a trivial dispute. The legal proceedings that followed in the Second Criminal Court were a study in conflicting narratives and the harsh realities of the justice system of that era. Wilson Burnett, initially charged with first-degree murder, attempted to save himself by weaving a desperate tale of self-defense. He claimed he had been awakened from a deep sleep by Jack attacking him with his fists, and that Jack had threatened to decapitate him with an axe. However, the physical evidence and witness testimony told a far more consistent story. Investigators found no axe at the scene, and the trajectory of the gunshot confirmed that Jack was standing at the wash basin, likely with his back or side turned when he was hit. Amanda Burnett, having finally found the strength to separate herself from her husband through her divorce filing, stood as the prosecution's most powerful witness. She testified to Burnett's long history of cruelty and confirmed that the shooting was a culmination of a day spent in an unprovoked, drunken rage. Despite the overwhelming evidence of a cold-blooded slaying and the heartbreaking dying declarations of the victim, the jury's final verdict reflected the complexities and often inexplicable leniency of the 1940s legal system regarding domestic homicides. On January 10, 1943, Judge Phil Wallace sentenced Wilson Burnett to just 2 years in the state penitentiary. For the Holland family, the brevity of the sentence was a secondary tragedy, an insult to the value of Jack's life. Yet, they focused their remaining energy on honoring Jack's memory and ensuring he was not forgotten. He was interred in a grave marked with a simple, poignant headstone bearing only the word brother, a title that reflected his true legacy as a protector and the hole his absence left in the hearts of his siblings. On the first anniversary of his death in 1943, Amanda published a memorial notice in the Commercial Appeal, a final public act of love for the darling son whose life was stolen in a moment of senseless, avoidable violence. The story of Jack Holland remains a somber reminder of a life full of potential, ended far too soon in the quiet woods of Raleigh. Ultimately, the story of Jack Holland is a snapshot of a life cut short by the very volatility he sought to protect his family from. Though Wilson Burnett's 2-year sentence offered little in the way of traditional justice, Jack's legacy was preserved through the resilience of his mother Amanda, who transformed a senseless tragedy into a lasting tribute. Today, while the Firestone plant is a ruin and the hospital has been replaced by modern research centers, the simple headstone marked brother remains a silent, enduring testament to a young man who left us too soon.